Hey everyone, my name is Wes, and welcome back to Terror Talk, where I discuss creepy clips online. Just to set up clear expectations, this is a commentary channel on scary stories and weird stuff. So, if commentaries are a thing, you're in the right place. The original horror music at the end of my videos was composed by me. Now, let's get into it and have some fun.
This happened 5 years ago. 5 summers ago, to be exact. My girlfriend at the time, let's just call her PS, had just graduated from college, with me having graduated a year earlier. We aren't together anymore, but there's no bad blood between us, and I don't regret a single bit of our relationship, even though it eventually fell apart. She was mixed, half Croatian and half Brazilian, and the two of us had always talked about going on a European trip together after finishing college. And if there's one thing you should know about PS, it's that if she put her mind to something, she was gonna stop at nothing to see it through. Call it the Latin blood. That's always the joke I made. That's just how she was. So as soon as she graduated, the two of us started planning the summer vacation we had always fantasized about. There was one glaring issue though. We were both painfully broke, so we'd have to cheap it. The itinerary we ended up settling on was pretty ambitious for two people on a shoestring budget. We'd spend a week in Croatia, finishing up with 2 nights in Rijeka, which was PS's grandparents' hometown.
Do you have any scary story experiences related to traveling abroad? Share your stories in the comments below. For me, not really. I don't have any scary stories related to traveling abroad. I've always kind of been traveling abroad with my family, although I did take a really cool trip when I was in high school. It was a band trip to 7 different countries in Europe. That was definitely an experience I will never forget. Very cool. I went to different countries like England, France, Switzerland. Switzerland is a beautiful, beautiful country, by the way. If you ever have a chance to go there, I definitely highly recommend it. But yeah, let me know in the comments below, because I know that traveling abroad can be dangerous, and that's why I tend to not ever do it. But also, it's just kind of a pain in the ass to go to other countries. In my opinion, it's just kind of a pain in the ass to me, but I can see why some people get a thrill out of it. But yeah, let me know in the comments below if you have any scary stories related to that kind of thing.
She had never been there before, but she'd grown up hearing stories about it from her grandmother, and I could tell she was excited to see where her family came from. Because we were trying to save every possible cent, we couldn't afford any of the nice hotels or even decent hostels. Instead, we ended up booking the cheapest Airbnbs and travel lodges we could find on short notice. I'm talking about places with 1-star reviews and photos that looked like they were taken with a flip phone. But we didn't care. We were just happy to be going. Zagreb and Dubrovnik were incredible, even on our tight budget. The cities were packed with tourists, which made it easy to blend in and find cheap food and free activities. But Rijeka was different. It's a port city on the northern coast, and while it's technically on the water, it's not exactly what you'd call a beach destination. More importantly, it definitely wasn't a popular tourist spot. Walking around, PS and I were clearly some of the only foreigners in the entire town. That should have been our first red flag, but honestly, we kind of loved it. PS speaks decent Croatian, not fluent, but enough to get by, and I was picking up bits and pieces as we went. We spent our first day just wandering around talking to locals, soaking up the authentic Croatian experience we couldn't get in the touristy cities. PS is one of those people who can strike up a conversation with anyone, and I'm pretty talkative myself, so we were having a blast just chatting with shopkeepers and random people on the street. Everyone seemed friendly enough, though I did notice we were getting some lingering stares. Not the usual curious looks you'd expect tourists to get. These felt different, like more intense, but PS didn't seem bothered by it, so I figured I was just being paranoid. On our second day, we decided to venture a little further from the city center to find somewhere authentic to eat lunch. PS had heard about this small restaurant area from someone at our Airbnb. Nothing fancy, just a local center that supposedly had amazing seafood restaurants. It was maybe a 15-minute walk from downtown through some residential streets that felt increasingly quiet as we got further from the main area. The restaurant itself was pretty nondescript, just a small building with a handful of tables inside, and a simple handwritten menu taped to the window. But the moment we walked in, I knew PS had been right about the food. The smell was incredible, and you could tell everything was fresh and homemade. We sat down at a table near the window and ordered way too much food. Grilled fish, some kind of seafood pasta, bread, and a bottle of local wine that cost about €3. I remember thinking we'd struck gold finding this place. The food was absolutely fantastic, better than anything we'd had in the touristy restaurants, and it was costing us practically nothing. At one point, I noticed that while we'd been eating, a group of 5 men had come in and sat down just 2 tables away from us. They looked rough, the kind of guys you'd cross the street to avoid in any country, but they were just sitting there eating, not really paying attention to us as far as I could tell. I was actually kind of surprised I hadn't noticed them earlier. I figured I had just been too distracted by how good the food was or too consumed in the conversation I was having with my girlfriend. I didn't think much of it and went back to eating, but I remember finding it kind of annoying how loudly they were talking. We were about halfway through our meal, just talking and enjoying ourselves, when PS suddenly went quiet. She was looking past me toward the back of the restaurant, toward those guys, and I could tell something had shifted in her expression. Before I could ask her what was wrong, she leaned across the table and said very quietly that we needed to leave right now. I whispered back, asking what she was talking about, but she was already reaching for her purse. She said she was serious, and there was something in her voice that told me I'd better listen. I still didn't understand what was happening, but she's not the type to panic over nothing. She speaks the language. She knew the culture better than I did. If she said we needed to get out of there, there was probably a good reason. I pulled out a handful of kuna bills and threw them on the table, way more than our meal costs, and I followed her toward the door. The whole time I was expecting her to explain, but she just kept walking faster, practically pulling me along by the arm. It wasn't until we were outside that I finally demanded to know what was going on. She looked back toward the restaurant and said she'd heard those men talking. They were discussing what they were going to do to us, to her specifically. Her voice was shaking a little, which scared me more than anything else. She said she heard them say they'd separate us first, and some guy named Luca would know what to do, whoever that was. She said some other things that I don't want to repeat, but the message was crystal clear. We needed to get back to the main part of the town ASAP. I told her they might have been joking, but she shook her head and said they weren't talking about things they wanted to do, but things they were going to do. She told me she got the impression that what they were discussing was routine as opposed to fantasy. I believed her. That's when I made the mistake of looking back toward the restaurant. All 5 men were standing outside now, and they were definitely watching us, not even trying to be subtle about it. The moment they saw me looking, they started walking in our direction. I grabbed her hand and told her they were following us. Without another word, we both started running. Not jogging, not walking fast, full-on sprinting back toward the city center. The problem was, we were a lot further from downtown than I'd realized, and the streets between us and safety were mostly empty residential blocks. I could hear footsteps behind us, and when I glanced back, all 5 men were chasing us now. They weren't even pretending anymore. They were just straight up pursuing us through the streets. It was downright terrifying. PS was in better shape than me, but I somehow managed to keep up, probably because of adrenaline. We ran for what felt like forever, turning down random streets, hoping we were going in the right direction. Finally, after maybe 10 minutes of the most intense running of my life, we started seeing other people on the sidewalks and hearing traffic. The men stopped chasing us as soon as we hit the busy area. I looked back one more time and saw them just standing there, maybe 2 blocks behind us, watching us but not coming any closer. It was like they knew they couldn't do whatever they'd been planning once there were witnesses around. We were both completely out of breath and shaking from adrenaline. She was crying a little, though she was trying to hide it. I'd never seen her that scared before, and it made the whole thing feel even more real. We found a cafe in the main square and sat down, trying to process what had just happened. That's when this older Croatian guy at the table next to us, who must have overheard us talking in English, leaned over and asked if we were okay. When we explained what had happened, he just shook his head and called us idiots. Not in a mean way, but like he couldn't believe how naive we'd been. He said tourists shouldn't wander around alone in that part of the city, especially not obvious foreigners like us. Then PS described the restaurant we'd been to, and the guy's expression got even more serious. What he told us literally made me dizzy. He said we basically walked into a known hangout for local criminals, that the place was connected to some kind of organized crime group that operated in the area. He seemed genuinely concerned for us, like we'd narrowly avoided something really bad. I mentioned something about notifying local authorities, and he just laughed, but he didn't elaborate further. Then he paid for his coffee and promptly left the cafe. PS and I didn't linger much longer. We got up after catching our breath and headed straight back to our Airbnb. The rest of our trip was basically ruined. We were too spooked to leave our room except to grab food from places right in the city center. We spent our last day just sitting inside, watching TV on my laptop and counting down the hours until our flight. Looking back, I'm incredibly grateful that PS had the presence of mind to get us out of there when she did. If she hadn't understood what those men were saying, or if she'd hesitated even a little bit, I don't know what would have happened to us. It's one of those experiences that makes you realize how quickly a normal day can turn into something genuinely dangerous, especially when you're in an unfamiliar place where you don't fully understand the local dynamics. I honestly still feel pretty stupid for being so casual in a foreign country. I know that's one of the most dangerous things you can do, especially if you look nothing like a local. We didn't talk much about the incident after we got home, but I know it affected both of us. PS had always been fearless about traveling and exploring new places, but I think that day in Rijeka changed something for her. Because it certainly did for me.
Yeah, pretty crazy, huh? And they make a good point that you can't just be so casual in a foreign country. And I think a lot of people traveling abroad probably make that mistake, I'm guessing. I really don't know because I don't really know anything about traveling abroad, but yeah, you can't really take it casually at all because there's a lot of dangerous stuff that could happen to you when you're traveling abroad, and unfortunately there's a lot of sick people that will take advantage of naive people that think that everyone out there doesn't mean them any harm, because that's simply the farthest thing away from the truth. I feel like a lot of people, especially in foreign countries, do have ill intentions towards travelers, and especially Americans, because the country right now is in a pretty bad state, and I'm sure that we're not friendly or on good terms with a lot of people that are, or they're not on good terms with a lot of Americans because of what's going on in the country and all that kind of stuff. But yeah, I think the story itself is pretty crazy, because imagine being chased by a group of criminals through a deserted remote town for like 10 minutes. Like, how intensely terrifying would that be? And I thought it was kind of chilling, the part where they get to the busy parts of the town, that they look back and they were just standing there watching like they knew they couldn't do anything else because there were witnesses around. Like, it honestly sounds like something straight out of a movie, honestly. Doesn't it? And how crazy, intensely terrifying would that be, just being chased by a group of criminals and then learning right afterwards that you were in a criminal hotspot hangout? Like, holy shit. Like, it's no wonder the food was so inexpensive at that restaurant. But yeah, I definitely thought that this was a creepy story and a really cool story. And I hope you enjoyed my commentary and the music, and I will see you in the next video.